We still have 2 more minutes. I think we will wait. Thanks, Vijay, for joining in and Sukirti for partnering. So yeah, this is the first time I think the Star in Me is partnering with Sipping Thoughts to host such an important topic. Yeah, we'll just give 2-3 minutes more for people to join in. It is just 4 p.m. IST. I know that's the scheduled time, but I think people are trickling in now. Just for their sake, we'll give 2 more minutes and then get started. All right, I see messages on the chat group. Madhu, you're saying no audio. Are you able to hear us? Hello. Okay, thanks, Pratibha. Thanks so much.
I hope I'm audible.
There was a break in the voice, Kirti, now.
I can see you.
On the chat, if people can just say if Vijay and I are audible, then we can just get started. All right, great. All right, good evening, everybody, and for joining us today. Today's session is going to be really interesting because along with all of us who's kind of joined in, even I think I'm very keen to hear what is that systemic approach that people should apply to find jobs in such challenging situations. Before I introduce today's speaker, Vijay Shivaram, I would briefly talk to you about who we are and why are we here. My name is Mahua. I'm the co-founder of the StarMe platform. That's what you see on the screen. So StarMe is it's a global platform, and we are also a diversity partner for organizations. Now, a good question that you would have, so what does StarMe do different? So we love to be your continuous learning platform for all of you, where we host a lot of webinars, where we get industry speakers like Vijay. We have empaneled 60 plus global leadership, transformation, business, and wellness coaches from the US, UK, Europe, Singapore, and India. You will see them soon on the platform and you would be able to access them and talk to them. As we speak, we have close to 3,500 women professionals coming from 35 plus countries. So that gives us that leverage where women can exchange thoughts and information so that you are not restricted, a view of what's happening in the rest of the world. As you are kind of browsing through the platform, right, all of you are not aware of the StarMe, to go and check HTTPS, just explore. There are group networking platforms also. Introduce Vijay. It be Sipping Thoughts. We're very, very happy to partner with Sipping Thoughts. And we have synergies, and it made a lot of sense for us to partner.
Well, thank you. We're so excited because one of the things that is coming from what should I do? A little bit of good idea. It was instead of keeping the tagline "Real Women, Real Thoughts," we wanted to create a new judgment platform and create a network of women for women and, of course, men that have supported us. We're available on all the social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and of course our website. Hello, Mahua?
Yeah, I think good here. All right. So yeah, now welcoming Vijay Shivaram. Vijay is the CEO of PES Corp, and really thankful that you took your time out to be here and talk about such an important topic. Part of the the inception team of PES, and he's joined PES from 2007, and he's involved with a lot of functional and strategies that all of you today wanting to hear about recruitment, about gig recruitment, and about scaling and strategies. And apart from being being CEO of PES Corp, he also is an investor for small ventures and ideas, and he's always keen to hear about them. So over to you, Vijay, and really looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Mahua. I hope I'm audible. Fantastic.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you both taking the time off and setting this up. I don't think so there's a better time to do something of this sort. The context is very apt. But I must be honest, there's no crystal ball. There's no real solution that if you follow this path, you will find a job. But my intention over the next 35 to 45 minutes is to possibly just give some ideas of what are the things that you could do that could help. And in the experiences over the years that I've had in the recruiting world, I've seen these ideas come to fruit. And so I will be taking you through a series of slides which throw in some thoughts, some ideas. A lot of it is something that you already know, but I'll just try to throw in some snippets in those ideas, what will really work and what has been seeming to work better than others. I don't have a lot of content. Most of the slides would have pictures, and I will just try to explain those pictures to you from my perspective as such. And thanks again for everyone joining. Really appreciate you guys taking the time off. So I'm going to share my presentation, and Mahua, just let me know once the presentation is up, just to make sure that everyone can see it.
Yep, all good.
All good. All right. Okay. Right. So my presentation would be divided into 3 parts. There's going to be one part which I'm just going to talk about me. You need to know who I am. Second part is a little bit about the organization I represent, why I think it would be meaningful from the experience that I've gained from this organization, and then to the core content as such. Yeah, so I grew up in the south of India, from Cochin. I grew up in Cochin, studied there, finished my schooling there. I finished off and went on to do my MBA with Loyola in Chennai, with LIBA. I finished my Loyola graduation. I was with GE for some time, and post which is when I joined my first job as a recruiter, and this was with the Adecco Group. This was way back, close to 2 decades back. I joined the Adecco Group as a recruiter, and I've been a recruiter ever since. I've been involved in all forms of hiring, and I've been very fortunate enough after leaving the Adecco Group, with a couple of like-minded guys, we started a company called Quess. It was earlier known as IKEA, IKYA, and now rechristened to Quess. And I'll spend a slide or two on Quess as we progress. I also had a chance to do another MBA with INSEAD, which gave me a little more larger perspective of how business is run. I've also had the way, during my tenure at Quess, I've had the chance to build not just some of the operations in India, but I've also had a chance to go. I was in the Philippines, so you see that nice little green picture there. I was in the Philippines for over 1.5 years, built the practice there in the Philippines, later eventually moved to Malaysia, and back to the lovely bustling traffic of Bangalore. So today, back in Bangalore, leading the recruiting business, as well as what we have was the contract staffing business for Quess. And at heart by heart, I've always been a recruiter, and I think that's possibly what I'm trying to share over the next few minutes on what I've learned over the few years that I've been there. So who we are in Quess. So what's most relevant to the group that's there for today is on the part which I mentioned, workforce management. That's what we do today. So we do contractual staff. We are India's largest private employer. So that would give you a sense of the number of people that we reach out to. So to an average, we have close to around, the last count I remember was close to 1,200 plus recruiters. These are guys who actively hire for customers of ours. These could be jobs ranging from the person who's delivering Amazon goods to you or e-commerce goods to you. This could range from products that you buy from shops. This could be technology professionals that we place across the country. This could range in healthcare. You name it, we're pretty much there. We're the single largest private employer in the country. And the size of India, I'm sure you understand how big that is. Close to 4 lakh employees that we have today. We also do a lot of skill development, and we also do a lot of work in the logistics space. We also have another very interesting site which most of you might be aware of. So we also own and run Monster.com, which is a job site. It acts as our online platform to the offline recruiting business that we run. We also are one of India's largest call center companies, domestic call center businesses. So most of your telecom operators, your dish to home operators, when you call the call center, you're most likely landing up at a call center run by us. We run technology businesses. We also one of the largest player in facility services and security services. So in short, if you really look at all our organizations, we are heavily people linked. And I possibly think that's where I'm hoping to add value, is the experience that I've had in hiring and managing talent in some form or the other. Like I said, billion-dollar company, so and listed in the stock exchange in India. This is what we do on an impact basis. I think we, for e-commerce companies, we staff more than 20,000 people a day in 30 days. We manage more than 256 million square feet and all that stuff. So this is just to give you an idea about how my experience is spanned across to help you in the next 40 minutes. Right. So I'm going straight to the point now to what exactly is happening in the market. I think the whole VUCA world is so relevant and more relevant than any other day. I think there's chaos all over. There's no clarity about what's happening in the market. You don't know whether you're in the beginning of the problem. You're not sure whether you're in the middle of it. You're not sure if it's ending anytime soon. But you do know there's a problem. And I think what I've always seen about India and what I've always seen in most markets globally as well is there's always this balance that comes into play. There would be organizations that don't hire. There would be a large number of organizations that also hire. So there's always a very strong equilibrium that the market offers. And I think one should realize that before they initiate a job search, etc., that not all is always gloomy, right? Sometimes the media might tend to make you look at that way, but I can tell you even today, the Quest Group has close to around 4,000 or 5,000 plus open roles that operate in some fashion or the other. And we keep hiring. So there's always a good equilibrium, but to know that equilibrium as who's hiring, who's not hiring, that's the science of it. So I'm going to spend some time on how we can go about doing that and figuring out that science. You will see a Dilbert comic strip in each of my slides. I'm a big fan of Dilbert. I won't read them out for you, but feel free to read them out yourselves as well. So I'm going to take you through the first set of slides. I think the most, I think Mahu was mentioning to me that there was some discussion sometime back about the concept of resilience. So I hope for those who have attended that session, I don't sound too repetitive, but I think this is possibly one of the most important aspects of being through a crisis is your ability to show resilience. There is an elephant on your back. You'll need to figure out how to get on and move forward with that as such. So I've put some thoughts or some frameworks for you just to get you an idea of how to develop this resilience on your first path to searching a job or searching an opportunity or looking for a career change and stuff like that. Point number one that I wanted to be very careful and very clear about is I'll use the reference of a candidate and an employer. Candidate is someone who looks for a job, and employer is someone who's hiring for a job, right? And I'll use most of my references around them. As a candidate, it's very important to be mindful. You will need to know what you're feeling. A lot of times today, or on a regular hiring metrics where people hire, you kind of put a false front and you kind of try to assume that this is what your client or your customer, or the employer wants to hear. But I think it's very important that sometimes we forget that it is only a facade or it's a programmed approach that you follow, but do not forget who you really are and what you're really feeling. I think it's very important, and only that helps you come out to be more stronger and better when you know exactly. So if you know it's not a good day for you, you need to know that. It's okay, you can show confidence even then. But if you try to just keep telling yourself that, no, I'm confident, when internally you still know it's a bad day, you will get conflicted results when you have discussions with clients. So it's important to know, be mindful about what you are, where you are, and what you feel. I was briefly mentioning this to Mahua and Sukriti a little while ago. I think one of the most problematic issues during a crisis is a little bit of self-loathing in a way, or you kind of move yourself into a little bit of a cocoon and you start saying, why is this happening to me? Why is it that only when I'm looking for a job that the market has to crash? Why is it that only that, I applied for 10 jobs today and then COVID happens? I think it's very important to know how to change the narrative of what you do. I think how you could throw a positive spin into anything. I was recently talking to a few of the MBA students from a very premier institute, and their biggest concern was, why does COVID have to happen when we had to pass out? And I do feel for them. I think there's no doubt about the fact that they've spent a large amount of money or so much of time and effort to get into a top D school. to realize that they ended up with COVID. But they're also the first batch that's going to be coming out post-COVID. They're also going to be the batch that came through this crisis. Just like we crossed the Y2K, we crossed the recession in 2009 and 2001, the dot-com. Everyone has a story to say that we crossed the crisis. We came through it, and we all will. And I think changing the narrative is going to be an extremely important part of developing resilience. If there's this constant play in your head or in your mind that's saying, why is it me, why now? I think you need to start rethinking that entire journey. You need to think, how can I look at it different? Can I see this as a positive spin? And I think you'd be able to find out answers for that yourself. There's no written rule around it, but changing the narrative is going to be an extremely important part of developing resilience. Cultivate empathy. I think you must also understand that you, as a candidate looking for a job, a lot of times there's an assumption that, that company likes to hire only these kind of people. That company looks at only this college for hiring. You must always need to understand that the employer that you're applying to also is going through the same problems that you are. In fact, it might be even bigger. There might be employers that are worried whether their employees' jobs are safe, whether they have enough funding for the next 3 months. And it's important that as you develop resilience as a person and as you apply for jobs, you need to also understand what could the company be going through. Put yourself in their shoes as well. And I think there's no better word than empathy to say that. And you need to know what the market situation is around you. Are you part of a containment zone? Is the employer that you're applying for in a containment zone? How does it maneuver? How is his thinking change? It's very important for you to develop your own sense of resilience rather than fall prey to biases or structured issues like, oh, he doesn't like these people, or he doesn't hire them. I know, I've heard, and stuff like that. Last but not the least, I think in the resilience, one general issue that I always see with a lot of candidates is the fact that they tend to get a little desperate. And when I say desperate, they start applying for all the jobs they see. They don't read the job descriptions. They don't read the titles. They tend to just go all over the place and share their resume with, say, 500 odd companies and hope that one will stick. Desperation doesn't work well with recruiters, because the minute they start realizing that you are doing the same and you're applying for all sorts of jobs, they also know that there's a likely chance that you're going to get multiple offers if that's a possibility. And therefore, being very structured and being very effective in your search process is going to be extremely important. I'm going to spend 1 minute on the last 3 points. I think possibly one of the oldest rule in the book of job searches is to know what your employer that you're applying for, know its customers, and know its investors. The investors is something new that I've added. Usually when we reach out to candidates, when we talk to prospective candidates for jobs, we ask them to do their research on the company, its culture, its people, its background, who are their end customers. And I think it's very important for you to be knowing that, for you to develop resilience when you have conversations with them, to know exactly, okay, what are you and how can you contribute there. But today in the new world, I think there's also going to be to understand the investors. Where are they getting their investments from? Are they a fund? Are they a fund of funds? Are they an equity holder? Are they a larger company? Is it a subsidiary? Is it a cost center? Is it a profit center? All this helps you build structure to the interview that you get to or the discussions that you have. I can give you a very simple example. There was a company that we were hiring for, which was funded by a global investment arm. The candidate came in with really not much of relevant experience, but he knew a lot about the investor. He kept on saying, you're invested in this, you're invested in that. It was pretty much available online, so it was nothing that he couldn't have found out. But as a recruiter, the recruiter was very impressed. He felt that this guy's done a lot of research. So even if he was not that relevant, he suddenly seemed very very interested in that candidate because of the fact that he seemed to know how his investor is thinking. And then suddenly he could feel okay, we can teach him. We can spend some time with him, but at least he knows what my investor wants. And hence it's very important to also know not just the company, the customers of the company, but also its investors. Company would include culture, structure, levels, as much as research. And I think the beauty about today's world is that almost everything that you see here in company or customers or investors is available online. It's unlikely that you will reach out to a situation where you've not heard. And my worry would be is if you're going to a company which doesn't have any of these threes available online, possibly you should do some more check on the company in itself. Right? So that's the first part of resilience. This is just possibly for those who are looking at getting into the format and those who are already in it neck deep, but are a little mindful about the fact that, oh, maybe there's something wrong. Just a framework for you. I think it might be useful. Right. The next part, I think in most companies today, you know, the CEO or the leadership would all talk about vision, culture, direction. These are big words today, you know, value systems. That's not going to change. Companies will not change these things overnight. But I think as a candidate, I think it's very important to know the purpose. And to know the purpose, you need to know two types of purpose. What's the purpose of yours? And what's the purpose of the company that you're applying for? So again, very simple structure that I've put together. Number one, know the domain. Know exactly what you care about. As a candidate, what is it that you really care about? Are you a marketing expert? Are you a finance expert? Are you an HR? And how does that domain experience help you in line with the company's purpose? And knowing that is going to be very important. Second, practice. What are we going to do together about it? So how does your purpose and the company's purpose get shared? You know, how do you ensure that your value system and the company's value system is very simple? You know, something as simple as integrity or ethical. It's the most common value that you would see in any organization, right? And so would you as an individual. You would always hold integrity as your highest. But how do you put the integrity in the mindset of the customer or the mindset of the employer and telling that, you know, as you handle your business so and so, that's how I would do it too. And therefore you kind of align at a shared purpose, which makes them come towards you, the employer come towards you and start listening to a little more. If you tend to say, yeah, I know your purpose is to be innovative, but I like structure, I like process. It's okay, not too bad. You're being honest about it. There's no doubt about it. But it's important to know what he wants to hear. And the best is to understand what is the purpose that you both share. And hence, it's important to practice that. And third is the community. So how you both together can impact the community. I think if you notice most organizations over the years, what started off to be, I will make so much profit, became how much would I help my investors and my shareholders, to today being sustainable. So the most common theme today, if you look at most organizations, is how they can help the communities around them. And why should your interview or why should your job search approach be any change? If I'm sure there are people that you want to help, I'm sure there's a community that you want to support. And how do you identify organizations that share that purpose as well? Now, the reason why I brought these three things together in a little bit of a Venn diagram is to possibly try to make you understand where your strengths are in this. You don't have to use all the three. Number one is very important. You need to know what you're strong in. You need to know what your strengths are, what you care about, and how does it align itself with the company. If your interests and the company's interests are two different directions, my take would be is you're wasting a lot of time, and you might not end up going much. So it's important to check this alignment there. And if a very simple exercise, so this is any job that you apply for, any opportunity that you're interested in, it's very important to put a little bit of a pro and a con. It's a very simple, as basic as it gets. Take a white sheet, write down the pros, write down the cons, see which one has got more and where your heart seems to be pointing at. And I think that's pretty much where the direction that you have to go. It's also very, very useful for our people who are moving from one company to another. So if you are doing just a career shift, the most easiest way is to do the pros and cons. And I think a lot of people tend to find it very too simple. I can do it in my head, but I always suggest do it on pencil and paper. There's no better to write it down. You will get a lot more idea about what your pros and cons are. The very physical approach of seeing there are more pros or there are more cons is far better to see it on paper than to have it in your head. So it's important to communicate what you want, what you like, what you share, how is your shared purpose together, have clarity on what you really want to do. And I think the last part, which I mentioned about modeling the behavior, you will have to showcase that during your discussions with whoever it is, whether it's a recruiter, whether it's HR head, whether it's the business that you're talking to for an interview, you will have to model the behavior that you would assume that you have a shared purpose with the other person on the other side of the table. A lot of times your conversations will have to shift when you talk to a recruiter in the company, when you talk to the CEO of the company, and let's say if you're talking to another business leader of the company. Every time you need to talk to different people, just remember these three parts, because these three would be different for each set of people. The way you speak to a recruiter of a company, his interest in your domain and your interest in the domain might be good, but maybe what you could do together and the community might not be of too much interest for the recruiter. So don't spend too much time on that. Just spend on number one. Now, if you know you're meeting a business head, let's say the head of supply chain for an interview, know what his purpose is, and how you could add value. So 1 and 2 become important. You start talking to a CEO for an interview. No, 1, 2, and 3, they have to be aligned. So your conversation styling also changes, and therefore you need to know for each. If you're going to give the same answers for all the 3 discussions, you're most likely going to be looking the same way from each of them. Each one has a different way of looking at candidates, and it's important you know that shared purpose. I hope I'm audible still. Good? Yeah. All right. Okay. This is possibly the toughest part to do, because there's a very thin line when you do a follow-up for an interview or a post-interview. It's very tough to know how much is too much. So there's one part which I always say: you can follow up, but don't stalk. The last thing you would want is to have someone feeling that you're just behind them, sending them 3 messages a day, 2 calls a day, having a couple of missed calls, sending them messages on LinkedIn, adding them on Facebook. Careful. There is a line that you have, but that doesn't take away the fact that you should not follow up as well. So I put in a small process chart. Again, it's very different for each type of process follow-up. Following up with the CEO on a discussion and following up with the recruiter of a discussion has 2 different angles. If you're talking to a job agency or a recruiting consulting firm, the follow-up can be different. I'll try to touch upon a few points, but if there's still any further point on that, I'm happy to take it at the Q&A at the end. Always double check your previous communications. Do not assume something that you just didn't hear from them. There might have been a line in some email that they sent you saying, we will reach out to you on or before the 15th. Now, understand that. Don't just assume that and then call them on the 12th and say, hey, I didn't hear from you. You're most likely going to get the response saying, we told you we'll get back to you on the 15th. So always double check your previous communications that you've had. Make sure that you don't override it and try to preempt anything. If there is a timeline, it's always best to follow the timeline. Don't call them if the listing specifies you not to. So today's world operates largely online. I'm sure a lot of you on the call today, on the webinar today, would have applied for a job on LinkedIn or would have applied for a job on an online portal, and there was no response to it, right? And I think that's primarily because of 2-3 things. One, there's a very strong filtration mechanism in most companies through their application tracking systems. So sometimes resumes and CVs get lost. Second, recruiters are overwhelmed with the number of responses they get, so they need to sift through. They might have just 2 positions to close, they must have got 200 CVs. So they'll pick out the first 10 that they seem that is most relevant and move on. And third, there could be scenarios where that they might have tried reaching you, or you are not reachable, or maybe there was some part of your CV that just didn't fit, right? So if there is a clear indication that you should not phone them, use emails. Use alternative channels like messaging email to them, just checking if there's any update as such. But if they've told you not to call, it's best not to call, because they've done that for a reason. And I think there's no point in rushing that through. I think this goes without saying to be a little polite and professional. I've had conversations with candidates. I've seen customers of mine, employers, that have said, he called me and told me I've not responded to him. It's like I'm working for him. He's the candidate. So I think it's very important for you to be polite and professional at whatever desperation level you are. Maybe you've not found a job for over a year. Maybe you're just not happy with the way they have acted upon whether they have on your resume and all this stuff. But that doesn't take away the value system that you as a candidate have, or the value system as an employer that he or she would have. you have to be polite and professional. That's a given. It's like integrity. You just have to be nice. Ask follow-up questions. Questions that were not maybe discussed. I've not had the conversation around the compensation. I was not sure when that's going to happen. I wanted to call you and just give you an update that my notice period's 30 days. I didn't mention it last time in the call, so I just want to check. I just want to update you. So you could find out areas where you could ask some follow-up questions which couldn't be covered. And they're very, very smart ways of doing this. And so you don't sound like a parrot, A lot of very interesting candidates. I've had times when candidates would have called and said, oh, sorry, I dialed your number by mistake. So they're innovative ways. I'm not saying you should do that. That's not the best way to do it. But I think it's very important for you to also have a set of follow-up questions at the back of your mind. It's like you're giving them more information, but at the same time, you're also doing a follow-up. So they don't figure it out as a follow-up. I don't know if there are a lot of HR people here. They'll possibly hate me for saying that, but no harm in doing that. Keep it short. Don't try to go personal. Don't try to go beyond the time that you have. Just call them and say, hey, you know what? I just wanted to check if I've got any update on the interview that I did. Then let's say the recruiter says, no, we're still waiting for a feedback. Oh, okay. So do you have a timeline? Is there something that I could get in 2 weeks? 1 week? And they say, yeah, 2 weeks should be okay. Or okay, thanks. I'll be in touch. And if there's anything, feel free to call me and close the conversation. Don't go on for longer conversations saying, hey, you know what? Did you see that movie? I just saw it the other day. No, not required. They don't have the time, and you shouldn't be wasting your time. Right? Be very careful. And a lot of times people tend to assume a little bit of chit chat kind of gets you into a better format of relationship. You can do that in a lot of other ways during your conversation, but not at the time of follow-up. Be crisp, be clean, move on. It shows professionalism as well. Okay, one of my most famous cartoons, actually, Coyote from Roadrunner. I don't know how many of you would have seen, but this is possibly one of the most and the best time to have also the advantage of because it's down. You don't have much to do. You're at home. You have time to research. You have time to look through. Imagine if you are at a job, you're always stuck with meetings. You're always traveling. You might not have too much time. You do have the downtime advantage right now. This is one of my most favorite theories that I've come to believe. The concept of knowing is out of the window. Today, if I ask any of you anything today, hey, do you know plasma technology? Do you know rocket science? Do you know how far it gets to, how far does it take to reach the moon? You have Google. The concept of knowing has left us. We have access to knowing at any point of time. And I'm coming back to my first slide. If you want to know about a company, you have everything with you. But what you don't have, and what I think one that you should use for your downtime, is the ability to learn. Learning to learn, how to improve yourself, how to educate. And I'm assuming you guys being part of this webinar itself is your understanding that you have to keep changing and learning with the times. So it's very important to know what skills you need to learn. Nobody is perfect. I finished my MBA in Loyola. Many years I worked. I went ahead and did an MBA with INSEAD. I knew that I've left some concepts. I wanted to see a larger canvas, and I went ahead and did that. And each of you would have certain areas that you would like to improve upon. I see we have a technology business where we also do a lot of technology training. And it is amazing that a large number of people who apply for the technology training are not techies, are sales guys, marketing guys. Because today the non-technology world is learning how to do tech. And hence, I think those, maybe if you're in tech and you already know how to code, maybe it's time to learn something about marketing. Maybe it's time to learn something about finance. And I think it's also very important to know what to learn for based on the organization that you want to join, based on the job that you want to take, what you find interesting with. I know people who have left everything and taken up courses on theater, drama. And so it's important to know how to learn. As you apply for jobs, as you start applying for different opportunities, be careful about what clutter you have on the social media as well. Well, many organizations have moved away from looking at social media to hire a person. I think some companies still do it, some companies don't. but it's important not to have too much of clutter. Having an upside down picture in LinkedIn, I don't know if it might serve the purpose. I don't know. There's no harm. It's your picture, right? But I don't know if it serves the purpose. Having a very extremely professional photograph taken for Facebook, I don't know. So knowing your social media presence, what you post on Instagram, what you post on Twitter. Let's say you've had a bad interview with a company and you just rant it out on Twitter. A lot of people are going to see that. A lot of people are going to know that. And they would assume that if you're doing it to this company, you're also going to do it for 10 other companies. So be very clear about what you do on social media. Clean it up. If you're actively looking for an opportunity, make sure that you've gone through the sites that you're active on or sites that you've not been into, and see if there's some cleanup that needs to be done. Who to ask for a reference? I think there's no better reference than your manager. I think personally, or the CEO of a company that you work for closely, there's no better reference from that, right? But not everyone might have the benefit or the opportunity to always ask their respective manager or CEO for a reference. So it's important to know and identify, even before you start applying for jobs, at least 2 professional references that you can use. Now, a lot of organizations might not use it to the fullest extent, might not leverage. But as you reach leadership levels, as you grow in your career, these things get more important. And the kind of reference becomes important. He referred me, he's the CEO of that company, and he gave me his reference. That has a lot of weight. Not all of us would have those kind of references, I'm not saying that, but at least try to choose the references that will not just add value to you, but also add value to the company that applying for. So if he feels impressed by your reference, that's going to help. And I think so. Don't give your mom's number, dad's number, or brother's number, even if they're going to give positive references. The guy who's going to do the reference check is going to know that. So know exactly who is your reference point as such. Just 3 functional points. It's important to be curious. Know what the company is about. Know what you need to learn about. No harm in being a little crazy and trying to learn something new skill. There's no harm at all. I know people who have been doing sales throughout their career today trying to learn how to code in UiPath through blockchain. It's okay, no harm to be, it's great to be curious. Be multifunctional. Gone are the days when you're a specialist in something. So like I mentioned earlier, if you are a techie, maybe learn marketing. If you are a marketing guy, maybe learn tech, digital marketing. So try to see if you can be multifunctional. So your conversation topics also circle around it. The need of the hour is to be entrepreneurial today. I think when we started Quest in 2007, we never used the word entrepreneur. It was not a big thing then. We just had, we just went to customers, said we are employees, we're colleagues, we started this company, we want to help and stuff like that. But today entrepreneur is a good word to have. So using that conversation about how you could change things for the customer, how you ideate, how you have helped your previous organization change a normal way of thought, that's very, very interesting for companies today. You don't have to, nobody's going to ask you for a whole lot of details, but they want to see that spirit in you, your ability and willingness to change. Bottom line comes to your willingness to change. So if they try to hire you, they want to see that, okay, are you willing to work in a new environment? Are you going to give new ideas? Are you going to help the company do something different? So entrepreneurial spirit is extremely key. Just using the word in your conversation itself helps a lot of times. Okay, so I'll get to possibly, I'm assuming a lot of people would be keen on understanding this part of the program is your search strategy. I'm assuming you're possibly like that guy there. You've got a grand scheme of things and you've got everything cut out in a piece in your head that this is how I'm going to look for. These are the companies I want to apply for Google. I want to apply for Facebook, and these are the companies that I'm going for. And then a few months later, you possibly realize that you just haven't been anywhere new and you're still there. Some might sound a little bit old school. So I'm not going to spend some time on what to prepare, but just a few 4 pointers. You need to know the business of the organization. Any company that you're applying for, know what are their verticals, know what is the jargon they use. So let's say if they're a pharmaceutical company, how do they make their products? What are the areas that they use in their annual reports, what is the language they've used in the job description. When we own Monster, for example, as a recruiter, when a recruiter walks into Monster and logs in to search for resumes, he uses something called a keyword, just like you would do on Google. And those keywords are the jargons that you use when you apply for a job. So when you know that you're looking for a job and you're applying for a job description, let's say you see the word transition in the job description. Someone should have experience in managing transitions of projects. But in your CV, that word is not there, but you have done it. As a project manager, you were involved in transitions. Add it back into your CV. So sometimes recruiters or a lot of companies fall through what they call as a control F fatigue. They need to see those keywords. So make sure that every CV that you send is not the same. Every CV that you send should be aligned to what the organization wants. How is their business trajectory looking? Where is their customer pie? How well are they connected in technology? How is their cash? And using those terminologies either on the CV or when you discuss with the prospective employer, using jargon and using words that they would understand because they use it as well, helps really, really, because they kind of get a connect. A lot of times candidates tend to make that mistake of having one standard template and they assume that's enough. And especially people who come from B schools, the B schools put you in a little bit of a box. You're a fresher at that point of time, so they expect you to have the same template. But as you progress, every single job opportunity has to be a different profile. It doesn't have to be maskingly different, but those keywords, like I mentioned, makes it. Accepting failure. I think this is possibly the most problematic issue when people go around their job strategy. They apply for 10 jobs, none of them respond, 5 of them respond, 5 of them rejected, 8 of them respond, 2 of them say we like you, but we don't like you. I think accepting failure is going to be a process. So as you reach out to recruiting agents, as you reach out to HRs and other people that you are networked with, it's important to also have a backline saying that you are going to be rejected in a lot of places. And they might have reasons, they might not have reasons. You might not even know if your CV even was seen. You might not even know whether the CV was even, whether you got a call and you got a call from the company, you call back, now nobody responds. There are parts of it which you just need to accept and move on. Don't hurt yourself by saying, I've applied for all the jobs on the line and not even one has responded. It's a phase. It will pass. You will get a call. You will get an email. You will get rejected. You will get interviewed. You have to go through that. So accepting failure is going to be a very, very key aspect, especially in the market times like these. You might possibly get one response out of 100. And knowing that is very important before you go for any. And all these things that I'm saying are particularly very important to do while we are in this crisis, because if you miss any one of these, that one application that you could have got through, you might miss it out. Don't get comfortable. Let's say you got 3 interviews. Let's look at the opposite of accepting failure. Let's say you suddenly got 3 interviews and you're taking those interviews and the calls went really well. Don't get comfortable. Continue the process. Ensure, unless you are kind of getting communication feelers from the employer that, yeah, we want to make you an offer. We want your pay slips. We want your documentation. What is your expected salary? When is your notice period? These are all leading questions that kind of tell you that you are moving ahead. Not in the round one. In round one, these questions are asked as part of sanity. But as you talk to business leaders and CEOs of the company, you kind of realize that they're getting a little more serious. But in the beginning stages, don't get too comfortable. Don't assume that I've got 3 interviews. I'm okay. I'll get one of them. I'm sure. You suddenly go through a slump. So this is a crisis mode. Everyone is looking for a job. Your neighbors looking for a job. Your classmates are looking for jobs. Your old peers in companies are looking for jobs. So don't get comfortable. Make sure that you are continuing the process of search till you know that something's really sticking up. I've mentioned a small brief part about headhunting because I think a big mistake most candidates make is the choice of headhunting firms or recruiting firms. There are many types of recruiting firms in the market today. And it's important to know what type of recruiting firm is most apt for you. There are executive search firms. These are firms that work only on CEOs, directors, leadership hires. If you're a manager, you're wasting your time applying for jobs there because that's not the target market that they want to apply to. So your CV would go there. You maybe even have a conversation with them, but it's unlikely it's going to move too far because that's not the area that they came to. There are firms that specialize in domains. There are technology recruiting firms. There are BPO recruiting firms. There are banking recruiting firms. So if you're a healthcare professional applying for a company that's doing technology recruiting, again, you're possibly going to get stuck. There are firms that specialize in entry-level hiring, volume, mass. And if you're a senior guy, applying to them is also not going to help you too much. So it's very important to know what kind of a headhunting firm you need to go by, especially during this crisis. Don't waste your time going all out. It's not going to help. So know the kind of firms that you're applying for, know the recruiting agencies that hire your kind of talent. So I'll give you a little bit of a hack or a quick check on that. Let's say you're a banking professional managing credit cards, for example. Look up Monster, look up Naukri, look up LinkedIn, find out the recruiters that have posted jobs that are most similar to yours. Most likely that recruiter that has posted the job is also handling positions similar in the banking industry. So you know that if you send your CV to that recruiter, there's a likely chance of having more jobs apart from the one that's posted. So that's a little bit of a hack. Second, on LinkedIn, you see that recruiters generally specify the domains that they're strong in. So if you're a healthcare professional, look for recruiting firms that specialize in healthcare. Look at recruiters that specialize in healthcare. This helps you in two ways. One, you get to the person who's hiring in your domain. And two, most likely or not, that person would have references of other firms or other companies which are hiring in your domain. So it's kind of interesting. Don't go blind out sending every single recruiting firm. I send a CV to that company. I send a CV to that company. They might not be relevant to you at all. That being said, there are organizations like Quest, Adecco, and a lot of other firms that do all. So when you have a company that does all types of domains, all types of functions, it's very important to find out in those domains, who are the recruiters that support the domain that I'm in. And then you go out there. It takes a little bit of time, but like I said, you have Google, you have LinkedIn, you have Monster, Naukri. All these places kind of tell you which are the right recruiters to reach out to. If you're still unsure, just call up this board line of those firms and tell, I'm a pharma professional. I'd like to speak to someone who hires for pharmaceutical hiring. And you're most likely going to be landing up at a desk of a recruiter that does so. As you apply for companies, you must understand that not every single position comes to a recruiting agent. It also has, people have their own employment, their own recruiters. So let's take a large organization like Google. So Google has many business divisions. So each of the business divisions also have their own set of recruiters. So the same process, you might be applying for, you might be a techie, but you might be applying for jobs by Google Health. May not necessarily be the right fit. So do your own research, make sure what kind of firms you're applying for. I think it's a big mistake many candidates make is by applying to firms that are not relevant to them, or applying to recruiters that may be not relevant to them. It just goes into the inbox and just disappears, right? I hope this was a slide that I thought you guys should be a little aware of. So I took some time on this. I'm moving on. Okay, so you got your search process right. You figure out your grand scheme of things, what to go about. You've also figured out how to pitch yourself, how to get your CV right, how to prepare. Let's say you get into the format of what's a deal. So what do you negotiate on? How do you know what to fight for? And more importantly, you know, what's the right balance of what you give away. So the first art of negotiation in anything in your life, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's with your job, whether it's with a vegetable vendor, is to know what your walkaway price is. And if you don't know what your walkaway price is, then spend some time and decide that. It's very important to know what is your walkaway price. Do not go by the fanciness of what you see online. Do not go by the fanciness of what somebody told you. Have your own walkaway price. You know, I always want to, I give this example quite often to many of my candidates. Let's say you have a candidate who's in the Middle East and who's, let's say, in Dubai, who's never paid tax in his life. His entire life, he's had a tax-free world, tax-free life, and he's decided to come back to India. Now, the first thing that hits him is a 30% tax on his face. He's never done that before in his life. And so the first thing that he does is his walkaway price. He's going to say, this is going to be my salary, which I got in Dubai. I have to add 30% because in Dubai, I never had that. So I'm going to add 30%. And over and above that, I'm going to add another 20%, which is my hike, which I would expect because I'm shifting jobs. you've lost half the battle, because Indians would not obviously pay what you were paying in Dubai. Okay, let's assume that a company does pay what you got in Dubai. Then the 30% is the law of the land. So you have to go deal with it. You have to figure it out. And then you can ask for the hike and figure out where the organization is going. So that's the first slide of knowing your balance, knowing what's your walkaway price, knowing what your education counts, how much. So keeping the right balance of how important is money, how important is time, and how important is your education. If you put them all together, really it boils down to the role that you're applying for. A large number of candidates that I've seen in my experience have only lost out because they get fixated on just the money. I want that salary. If I don't get that salary, they would have had a great job. They would have had a great role. They would have had a great organization. But because there was a 20% change in the compensation, they would have said no. Risky situation to take, risky answer to give you. You have to balance it out. It's very, very important to know what really matters to you at that stage. So if you're a mid-manager, how important is your career to you? If you're a leadership, how does the world see you? How do you protect yourself? Because most organizations have understanding of the market. Most organizations know what is the parity within their organization. They know they're not going to cheat you out by giving you a lower salary, because they also have a parity in their organizations. My suggestion, always keep the role as number one, organization and culture number two, and then compensation as number three. And the minute you topsy-turvy that, then your perspective of jobs change. And then so there was this very interesting analogy that once I heard, that if someone wins the lottery, his excitement only lasts for 7 days. That's it. After that, it's just regular day. So even if you got that extra 10%, which is important, I'm not denying that the money is not important. But if that is your only priority and you win that, you get that extra 10% and your role sucks, the company sucks, you're possibly 3 months down the line, you're looking for a job again. So be careful about what your balances are. Know what are the benefits that you're looking for. Understand what is your compensation structure and how is it in line with the employer's compensation structure. Because in a country like India, you have benefits, and therefore knowing apple to apple. So if you got employee stock options worth of X, but in the other company you don't, it might not be an apple to apple comparison. So just take what is your salary here, what is your salary there, and then throw in the employee stock option saying, this is what I got there. Is there something else that you can give me here? So that will help you create that deal format. But if you just total it up and say, hey, I'm on a 1 crore salary, you're giving me 60. But if you really look at it as an apple to apple, you are always on 60, you are always on 50, and you're getting 60. The rest was all other components, which this company gives, but they just don't mention it to you. So you need to get that out, clear it out, and make sure that you already know what you have to do for the offer. So it's important to know what exactly you're really going for. So again, the same balance thing. And the last part is the walkaway price. Know your walkaway price. And when I say price, it doesn't necessarily have relevance to compensation. It could be designation, it could be role, it could be capacity. I have seen, for example, let's say you're managing the South for an organization and you're going to another organization, your walkaway price would be anything that does not involve South or more, I would not take it. So if they give you just a city, then you might not be interested. But know your walkaway price. Till then, you're always up for negotiation. So, but if it's below the walkaway price, then of course, I'm sure you know what to do there. Possibly the most important thing for the post-COVID world, I think a lot of you are already into it in a large way. I noticed that ever since Sipping Thoughts and Mahua put up, the Star in Me put up my page on LinkedIn, I started getting a lot of connections, invitations. So I'm assuming you guys are already in various forms of social media, but it's important to be connected. It's important to be networked. I'll just remind you about the stalking part. So that's still not a good thing, even on LinkedIn, even on Facebook, etc. So that's not good still, but it's important to be there. Be part of events. If you're a supply chain professional, if you're an HR professional, you're an IT professional, be part of events. Unfortunately, with the COVID world, the events are going to be largely online, but you will hear about speakers. You will hear about people who are talking. Get connected to them. You don't have to always go behind and, right? So never start a LinkedIn connection by saying, hey, I'm looking for a job, help me. That's not going to help. Get connected first. Say that I'm amazed by the work that you've done, the career that you've achieved, the job that you've done. I'd love to be connected with you, and then press connect and you get connected. And then after you get connected, then start the conversation slowly that you're looking for an opportunity. You saw this opportunity online. I realized that we are connected on LinkedIn. I thought it would be best if I could ask you if you could refer me and stuff like that. But I've seen a lot of times candidates just start writing on LinkedIn and sending direct emails saying, hey, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me? Okay, fine. If I have a job that matches your profile, that's most likely. But otherwise, it's just going to be a large amount of emails that goes through and passes through as such. Another aspect which I think is also going to be very important in this post-COVID world is to have a career coach, and the word mentoring I mentioned. I think Mahua and Sukriti in their own way do a lot around that, and I think I'm sure they'll bring it up as they speak to you and all this stuff. But the identification of a career coach is going to be the single most important thing in a COVID world or a post-COVID world. Know who's going to be interested in building your career. It will never be your boss, because your boss is already invested in your career. Your manager is already keen on getting you to grow. That's fine. That's an assumption. Is something which you will have, unless you have a bad boss, of course, that's a different thing. But apart from that, their KRA is to make sure that you grow. Find out career coaches that are outside of the system. Find out people, even if you have to pay for coaches, no harm. There's really no harm, because that person's going to be invested in improving you. This could be improving you from a communication standpoint. This could be improving you from a job standpoint. This could be improving you from a mindful standpoint. It could be a range of things, right? And I must be honest, I have two career coaches in my life, and they've possibly added most immense value to me than many of the people that I've had over the years. So it's important to know a career coach, identify with them, and you don't have to have one. You can have 2, 3, 4, depending on. You could have a coach that's expert in marketing, who can help you what are the trends in marketing, and all these languages that you hear from the coaches can actually be translated into your job search, and when you have discussions and stuff like that. Important if you are still not sure how to go about identifying a career coach, etc. There's Google, then there's Mahua and Sukriti, but everything's available. You just need to go through, check their background, know the coach's background, know exactly is it aligned with what you have done and how they can help you, etc. But it's at the end of it all, it really boils down to know yourself and know your worth. If you're constantly going to be telling yourself that you're the best, then possibly you're never going to learn anything new. So I don't think so any of you would be there. But there again, coaches would say no. You would not have enough money to take part of events. LinkedIn messages would just never get accepted. So you're still going to hear a lot of no's in this process. But over the journey, you will find people. And it's amazing how people today are willing to help and go out of their way to build careers for their mentees as such. So important to have that, and keep a close tab on what you do on social presence. I'm a big user of LinkedIn. I keep my Facebook for my personal stuff and LinkedIn for my professional stuff. Know what to write. Don't write these long mails. I've got 15 years of experience. They just copy paste the first paragraph of their CV and send it on LinkedIn. Doesn't work. Make it personal. It's a professional network. So you'll have to make it simple. Saying, hi, great to be connected. I've had this amazing career at this marketing firm and IT firm. And, I found your profile so interesting. I heard that your company is looking for people. Just thought I'll connect and see if there are opportunities. I can more or less 9 or 10 times you're going to be responding no, but that one person is going to write, yeah, I know, I can share your profile with my HR. Please send me your CV. That's all you need. That's all that you need. Spend time on this network to find out more. And just not LinkedIn. There are many networks, if you Google it out, for professional networking. And as you see and take part in webinars as you are today, get connected to everyone in the webinar, whoever you're aware of, and they will keep those connections further on, add value. Because at the end of the day, all these platforms operate on the 6 degrees of separation, right? Conceptually, it's between you and anyone in the world, there'll be maximum of 6 people between you, right? So even if I wanted to reach out to Obama, they will be at a maximum of 6 people between us that I could reach out to. Not that I will reach out or I can, but there will be. And that's the concept of 6 degrees of separation. And therefore, the more connections you have, the more networks you have, it really helps. The last part, possibly again very relevant to the times. Again, it goes back to my stalking part as well as keeping in touch and networking. Know your distance, right? So it's important to know what is the physical distance that you need to have. You can't land up at the employer's place every day, hoping that you will get a job. This is not a factory job, or you can't just walk in and stand in front and say, I'm here to get a job. You need to know how to get connected, what are the options that you have online, what are the options that you have offline, and how much you keep in touch through digital platforms. Do you write an email to them one day, the next day you write to them on LinkedIn? As a practice, I've always said, if you've had a conversation with someone, go back and add them on LinkedIn immediately. Don't wait for 10 days to do so. While their memory is fresh, just add them on LinkedIn, they'll add you, and then that conversation can start there. It was great talking to you, adding you on LinkedIn, track, over. And then you're connected, and that helps you further. So know your digital distance, know your physical distance, know the social environment that you're in, use your distance very well. It's extremely important to make sure that you don't cross the line, because the minute you start crossing the line, then the other one just keeps going back and keeps going away. Stuff are there. Okay, so this is just a summary of everything. I hope I'm not too long on this, but this is just a summary, and I will be happy to take any questions if there is anything that you would like to have answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. I'm just going off video because I think I was getting stuck, but there are questions already. So I would love to get started. Others, please start putting in your questions. So there's a question that says, Vandana has applied for 3 companies, and all the 3 companies have told her that the position is on hold due to COVID. And I think she asked this question when you talked about the follow-up example. So how will she follow up, and how does she go to the next step, that given that she's got this response?
So, great question. Most common problem, I would say, in most job searches that during this time. So if you've applied for 3 jobs and they've all responded to you, that's good. Write back to them and say that, thanks a lot for the response. I've always been actively involved in looking at your organization as a career option, and I would like to continue to be connected. And get connected with them on LinkedIn or any other platform that you think is most apt, and keep the conversations going on every week, 2 weeks, or every 3 weeks or so, depending on where you left in that conversation. Was it a second interview or the first interview, etc.? Because they're most likely, like I mentioned, you'll have to empathize with the situation that they're going through, and they must be on a hiring freeze. So if they are, you should stay connected, because at some point of time, the hiring freeze is going to get lifted, right? And hence just continue to connect through an offline medium, through LinkedIn or something like that, and be connected with them and follow up once in 2-3 weeks to say, hope everything is well, hope you're safe. Just following up on my conversation 2-3 weeks ago, that if the roles have opened up, I would be glad, because your organization is just fantastic and I'm really looking forward to being part of it. And you just continue that process for a limited period of time. And other option that you could do is keep scouting out the portals and online services where jobs are being posted, and find out if there are any jobs that have been posted by that company or those companies that match your profile. And then you could use that as the reference point to go back and apply and say, hey, I saw this job posting. Not sure if you had my chance to consider my CV, but I thought it would be a very apt fit. So I'm just doing a follow-up, attaching my CV again for the job of this code. And if I'll be happy to help. And because sometimes they tend to move on, like I said, the recruiters have sometimes a control of fatigue. 2 weeks back, you've applied for a job, it's over, the job has come again, the manager is saying, I want CVs today. So they quickly go online, post the job, and get responses. So one of the two.
All right, great. The next one is a very interesting question. So yeah, we say, right, whenever you go for a particular interview, do not say bad things about your previous organization. But the question is, if my experience was really not good in my previous organization, shall I not be honest while I'm giving the interview? So how should I put my narrative?
Very good question. Tricky question. I wouldn't know the scenario at which you've gone through. But yes, to your point, you could always spin off the positives that you've had in that organization. And I'm sure not all in that organization would have been bad, right? So just focus on the things that went well. Like, I had the organization culture was great. The CEO was fantastic. He had a great vision, etc. It's just that there were some other options within the organization that just didn't align to what my purpose was. But your organization that I'm applying for has the same line purpose that I have, and then possibly shift back. But going and whining about your previous job or your previous manager, honestly, nobody really has the time to listen and try to. While I think there will be some amount of empathy the recruiter will show to you or the manager will show to you, right? But honestly, that's not helping you or them get you the job. So there's really no point in whining and crying about something that went wrong. That was hard luck. But if there was a genuine thing that happened by virtue of which it is important to bring it to the table, then yes, please do. But if somebody said, why did you look for an opportunity? Use the positive spin out, saying how you find the current opportunity at the company more exciting and why the earlier company did not have that shared purpose along with it. And that's why you're applying. Rather than saying, no, I had a bad guy. The manager was just so bad, I had to leave. It doesn't help him understand you.
Yeah.
It possibly understands your situation, but never understands you.
Yeah. Nice. The next one, I think what you will respond, but anyway, I just asked the questions from Anusha. So I think she's a digital marketer, and whenever she's applying for companies, her point is nowadays JDs need a lot more skills than one would usually have. JDs will have a list of them. She's a digital marketer, and most of the good companies that she's applying for requires the candidate to have knowledge on machine learning and other newer tech stuff. So what are your thoughts about this?
Right. So I'll give a nice diplomatic answer to this as much as I can. Like I mentioned earlier, knowing is easy now, right? So to understand machine learning, to understand the basics around it, to understand how relevant it is to your job as a digital marketing, how to understand its impact, all that is available online. I doubt, while it might be written on the JD, unless I've misunderstood the JD, but it is unlikely that they would expect the digital marketing guy to actually build code for machine learning. But I'm assuming what they expect is your basic knowledge of how both of them intertwine each other. How do you understand that when someone's, I'm sure most of you have seen options when you search for a trip to Goa, then next time you visit any other website, you say the trip to Goa is flashing at you, and how as a digital marketing person, you align yourself with thought processes like that and how it helps the organization as such. So I think what they're expecting you is the knowledge of how both profiles talk to each other. But if, let's say, the technical knowledge itself is very much important, then possibly then the role that you're looking for is something which is more technically driven than being a digital marketing person. And that definition you'll have to look through with the JD, or possibly reach out and say that I understand machine learning in the basics. I understand how I could leverage it. I understand the platforms like UI, like various platforms that you could use for machine learning, but I don't physically code it. I don't physically build it, but I know how to go about using it. So I think that differentiation you'll have to figure out, because if it's a pure tech job and you're not a techie, then the only way is to learn the tech, right? So that you'll need to understand that differentiation.
Right. The next question, I think, is really broad spectrum because we're talking about 3 different target segments. So the question is, what can be the job search process in the current scenario? And the person has talked about 3 scenarios. One is somebody who's restarting careers after a gap, changing career paths, or a fresher. And the 3 different answers, absolutely. So what should be the job strategy?
What is the first part again? What is the first question? Changing career.
Do you see the, changing career path, joining after a break, and the third is for freshers.
So joining after the break, I would say, is possibly trying to align yourself with what are the skills that you know best, and what are the things that you're strong in, how you've kept yourself updated in the break that you've taken, and what kind of a job that you're looking for, and keeping abreast of the information around it. So when you're applying for a company after a break, I think one, you have to be honest as to why you took the break. I think a common mistake that most people say, I was on a sabbatical, right? Well, it may be true. I'm not denying the fact that it might be true, but what did you do in that sabbatical that changed you or made you learn something new? Or how do you feel you've become apt for the job now at this point of time? So that's on the taking a break. But you have to be honest as to why you took the break. A lot of people make the mistake of saying that I took a break because I had some personal commitment. Be honest, say what happened, and there's no harm in saying that. The second part, the career shift. Now I'll break that into three parts, and that's possibly the toughest. There are three parts. One is easy, one is a little tough, one is very tough. When you do a career shift, if you're shifting from one company to another to do a same job or similar job, or maybe in a slightly more elevated role or with more responsibilities, that's the easier part. So that's straightforward job searching process. You apply for jobs that match to what you do and what you've learned, and then you just show why you're better and why you feel you're apt for the role. That's the easy part. Now let's say you're looking at an industry shift, right? Now, if you're looking at an industry shift where you are now doing HR and all of a sudden you want to jump to marketing, or you were sales and all of a sudden you want to do HR. Now that's, you will need to show credentials as to why that's going to happen. Just purely by saying I love HR or I love marketing is not going to take you there. What have you done to make yourself equipped for the job to have? So a lot of people do MBAs for that. A lot of people try to take up postgraduate after a few years of experience to shift industries or shift functions totally, because through the MBA they pick up knowledge, they pick up the caliber required for the new job to be, and hence it's very important that if you are shifting industry, you need to get yourself apt for the role to apply. Just pure interest may not help always, or pure intent, like I love HR and that's why I want to be HR. I've been a sales guy, but I love HR, I love talking to people, may not always work. You'll have to be apt for it. The third part, which is possibly different, where you're looking at a career shift with a change of industry and in a different location altogether. So many people face this issue when they want to apply for jobs abroad, right? So let's say they're a call center agent in India and they suddenly want to go to Dubai and take up a job, or they want to go to the US and do a job in sales. Now that's the toughest, because not only are you jumping industry, you're jumping location, and you're also going to a country where people don't know you, and that's the toughest part. And there it really boils down to the real passion and effort that you're willing to put to get that job done. And that's a tough part. That's a real tough part, because that will have, each individual application will have to be treated differently. Your approach has to be different. And it boils down to that very passion that you want to get that job, and that's how you would get it. The third part was, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Freshers.
Freshers, yeah. So freshers, I think it's interest. I would say it boils down to what your interest level is. What do you want to do as a fresher? MBA freshers would have some structure because they would have specialized, or they would have some career path built for them. For graduate freshers, it's tricky. A BCom fresher could go into possibly any domain that he or she would want to. I think it would boil down to what you find interesting and follow that purpose as such. And I think that's predominantly. And I think the beauty of today's generation is that the generation that's passing out of colleges today and schools today, they really go behind passion. I possibly did not have that much of an option, even though I love my job. But when I left my college, I never even gave thought to my passion. We had structure, the same engineering doctor, blah, 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 blah. But today's generation is different. They follow passion. They follow interest. And freshers should follow that. I think that's my thing. But if they found that passion, then just go behind the journey about what kind of jobs are available there and go behind those companies.
Absolutely. I mean, so rightly said. Nowadays, it's so thoughtful when we see the young grads, they're thinking life at a very different lens. We were very compliant and we thought about security much more than the passion and what we would want to drive. Yeah. All right. The next question, and I think it applies for women because of a lot of statistics that we have seen. If someone has 50% of the experience required as mentioned in a job description, is it good enough to apply, or you should hold back?
I think it would boil down to the job description's ability to define what is a must-have and what is a can-have. Most job descriptions will have to split into what are the must-haves for that job, right? For example, a graduation is a must-have, maybe. I'm just giving an example. So the job description says should be a graduate. Now you need to know that's a must-have, and if you're not a graduate, don't waste your time, because the company is not going to look at it, and it's already going to get applications that are graduates. Then there'll be can-haves. Now, if a can-have should be great, should have great presentation skills, or should be very well versed with tools like Excel and PowerPoint. Now, if it's a can-have, then no harm in applying, because these are things that you could pick up, and it's not going to be derogatory to the application that you're applying for. So it'll be on how you define that job description into what are the must-haves and what are the can-haves. Now, let's say the 50% that you're referring to are things like communication skill, presentability, basic IT skills. And let's say the must-have is coding experience in Python, and that you don't have, then trust me, you're just wasting your time applying, even though you have 50% of the skills. But the core experience required is the must-have of knowing Python as a skill. So you'll need to figure out what are the must-haves in that and what are the can-haves. And if you have more than 50% of the must-haves, there's no harm in applying for the job at all. But your can-haves are just good to have.
Right, right. The next question is very specific to working moms who had taken a break and wanting to come back, because now, because of COVID, a lot of organizations are figuring out alternate working models. Like we have the recent news where Twitter has said that anybody can work from home till the time that they want to, right? So there is changing trends that's coming up. So somebody wants to know that what are your thoughts about this, and will policies and trends like this ensure that we will have more women joining workforce?
Absolutely. In fact, in a very recent webinar that I had conducted, I was telling them that, the biggest boon to this whole work from home is the diversity of employee workforce will significantly change. And it's just not with women, but people with disability, people with other issues that they couldn't leave home. This would just open a whole arena of opportunities at this point of time. But I'd like to just go back to the fact that it all boils down to also the maturity of the organization that's hiring. And that is something that you will need to look at, is how flexible they are as an organization. See, there are some roles, for example, that have to be heavily supervised, like an assembly line. Those are heavily supervised jobs. Well, you might have options of work from home there or flexibility in different jobs but at some point of time, because of the inability to be supervised physically, those jobs become harder to get for people who are stuck at home as such. So you need to understand the organization's maturity, the organization's functional ability to keep people at home. We've had cases, we've had scenarios where in the COVID scenario where people had to move their desktops home, but the end customer said that, no, this is data privacy issue. We will not be able to give your work home because it has to be within the servers of the organization and within the corporate environment, and therefore you take a 2-week break or 3-week break, etc. And so there are multiple strings attached to. But I think what has happened today with the work from home option is that it will increase diversity options much more than before, and therefore following what you, again, I go back to the job part where somebody earlier asked about how do you apply after taking a break. I would pertain this to people who are at home as well and have not had to work for some time because they've had a child to take care of, or aging parents, or any of that format, or they just stuck at home. You will need to follow what exactly are you good at, what has been your strength, and how to follow those jobs that match that, and try not to get desperate that you've applied for 100 jobs and nobody responded. It will take time. Some subtle points that I would just like to bring up with this structure, some mistakes that people make is, let's say you're a returning Indian, you're again in the Middle East or you're in Singapore, you want to come back to India, you want to apply for jobs, because in Singapore maybe you're not allowed to work, now you're coming back and you want to work here. You post a CV on Naukri and Monster with a Singapore number. That doesn't help. Recruiters want to see an Indian number. That's one simple failure that people tend to make. You are at home for a long time. You've not updated your CV. You've even forgotten how to apply for a job. You've lost track about it. Get a career coach. Find a recruiting firm or find a recruiter. Help them guide you. Find friends who are in the HR fraternity. Help them guide you through the process. Don't go blind and prepare a CV without any structure or just apply to all the jobs available. Like I said, go with structure, understand what you're going to go behind, what are the jobs that really interest you. And I always say, go through jobs that are available on these portals like Monster, LinkedIn, etc. And if you find jobs that are interesting, do some research. Find out who's been doing those jobs and how exciting it is for you. And how do you get to those jobs? Are there any skills that you might need to have? Do you need to prepare yourself with learning some new technologies? I don't know. But coming back after a break, it's very important to prepare yourself right and not get desperate.
All right. The next question is somebody on this call was on a contract job for some time, and she's a data scientist, has equipped herself with certain online courses and certifications, and currently doing an AI course with online course with IIT Roorkee. Her question is, she's not very active on LinkedIn. She has put her profile on Naukri, and that's where she's been kind of getting stuff, but not the ones that can convert. She wanted to ask you, can you give suggestions of few other recruiting firms, not LinkedIn, but HR recruiting firms where she can get in touch with?
It would be I come from a recruiting firm, so you should apply to Quest. I think that's number one. But it would be unfair if I cherry pick firms out of this. But I think what is more apt is, you mentioned you were a contracting job. You were in a contracting job, and if you're continuing to look for contract jobs, then you look at firms that are in the contracting space. If you want to look at a permanent job or a full-time job, you need to identify IT or technology recruiting firms. So like I mentioned earlier, if you've done data engineering and AI, find out companies online on Naukri and Monster job posts. Who are the companies that are posting these jobs? Which are the recruiters that are posting these jobs, etc. But I can tell you there is an enormous amount of firms, and I would take at least 3 days just to give you the names of firms over there. But everything is available on Google. Don't get stuck onto one platform. Put your CV in places where you're visible. You must understand, as you are doing it, there are 10,000 more people also doing it, and that's why possibly you don't see the benefit of it all. Look at the city that you're in. Find out which are the top recruiting firms that are there, which is the city that you want to apply for jobs, which are the top recruiting firms there. You have everything from the global MNC recruiting firms to large Indian-based recruiting firms. But the choice of skill, the choice of domain, and the choice of location. These are the three things that you need to identify. And with those three, you will be able to identify the recruiting firms that specialize in those three.
Great. In fact, the next question, I can understand, it's similar, but I mean, her point is she has been looking for a job for last 1 year and has been extensively searching around Naukri and LinkedIn. Though maybe there are exchanges that has happened, but nothing, there's no response. There has been no response where it reached to the interview level. So is it worth applying in these platforms?
Well, we own Monster, so if I say it's not worth, it would be wrong. So of course, it's worth applying for these jobs. But like I told you, each job process has a particular timeline. Each company has a different timeline of sourcing. I wouldn't know the background of the companies that you've applied for or the jobs that you've applied for, but possibly if you could just reflect back on something that I just said on what are the firms that you need to go behind, who are the recruiters that you need to go behind, and where does your interest really lie? Have you applied for too many in a too short a time? Have you seen people posting jobs that are similar to what you're interested in? I will need to know what happened. 1 year is a long time to not even get an interview. So there's something either wrong with the CV format that you've used, or there's something wrong with the messaging that you're continuing with them, or functionally wrong with how the jobs that you've applied for. So you'll need to possibly retrace your step, and with what I just showed you and just go through each of those phases, your results should be better. But again, unfortunately, it's not the best time now to go through those steps again with the COVID thing. But I think be smarter on who you're going to approach. Follow the kind of positions that you really want to go behind, because you've already lost a year on it. So be careful now on what you're applying for.
Great. I think there's another one coming up. I have applied for several jobs. Wait, let me read the question. I've applied for several jobs, but I never got a call from the talent acquisition team. All right. I think Pratibha, we'll again not get into the question because I think Vijay just responded. But I think I have a common question which is coming as a gist from everybody. Is see, there are millions of people, right, on LinkedIn or Naukri or Monster who are continuously applying. Would you leave some tips on what are the ways to stand out so that they get a little more, I mean, they're seen more than the others? I mean, there's no easy answer because of platform solution, but it would really help. I think those are the repeat questions that we are seeing.
So fair enough. So I think just before I get into those little hacks or tips, what happens in most of these online platforms is, like I mentioned, there is multiple avenues by which a recruiter or a company gets CVs. All right, so you have one which is the online platform, the Naukris, the Monsters, the LinkedIn's of the world. You have many companies have their own career websites where they also see traffic coming in. They also work with recruiting agencies or recruiting firms that also supply demand. There's also the employee referral scheme that also channels in CVs. And there's also that comes with job ads that they post on hoardings or radio and stuff like that. That also comes through. So functionally, there's so many channels that come, and that's why a lot of times when you apply through only one channel, your CV kind of gets lost out because the recruiter is seeing channelization from different sources. So to go to the tips again, I might sound a little like a broken record, but the 3-4 things that you need to do is your CV should be in line with what the JD says. If there are words in the job description that you've done, but it's not in your CV, add it back into the CV. For example, a very simple thing, let's say the JD says great communication skills. Add that back into your CV. It's unlikely that you will not have it, but maybe you have not mentioned it. Has experience handling a team. Bring it back into the CV. If you've handled it, of course, be honest. If you've not handled, don't mention it. But if you handled it, make it sure you've added it back into the CV. So the recruiters or the hiring manager kind of relate the job description to your CV and therefore see you as an apt fit. Second, you cannot rely on one channel. Just by applying on Naukri doesn't necessarily mean that that they have got your CV. Because they get tons of CVs through other channels, and by then, like I said, there might be just one position open, they would have got 100 CVs. And therefore, refreshing your profile on online portals, applying for jobs through a regular fashion, not through aggressive, but through a regular fashion. If let's say you know that there is a job in XYZ company, can you go to the website directly and apply? Is that faster? Can you go through a recruiting firm that you know hires for that company? Do you know an employee or a colleague or a friend who knows someone who works for that company? Can you go through them? Because employee referrals are the fastest way to get hired. Always. Employee referrals are always the fastest way to get hired because it motivates both the employee as well as the new hire. So you will have to look at all the channels that you can leverage before just applying and assuming that will work. So you have to go through these processes. It's not a one foolproof answer that you just apply on one and you'll get calls like crazy. And keep your profile on the online portals active. And I say keep your profile online so active is make sure that you visit the Monsters and the Naukris at least once a day. You're actively looking for job, because it's very important. Because when a recruiter searches for a profile on Monster or Shine.com or any of this, they kind of look at which are the profiles which have updated or activated their profile in the last 30 days. So if you have not updated your profile or even logged into your profile in the last 30 days, it kind of goes back to the 8th page and recruiters don't go there. So at least once in a day or once in a week, just log into your Naukri or a Monster or Shine login and just go through your CV again. Just make sure there are no changes over there. And but in the system at the back, it shows that you activated your profile, and therefore, if somebody searches for the job, your profile comes up front.
All right. Thank you, Vijay. And I think we are just on time. It is 5:30 p.m. IST, and immensely thank you for taking the time and sharing such, I would say, insights where people can apply immediately. For the ones who are on the call after every session, we send you a feedback form. It just takes you 2 minutes to kind of fill up the feedback form. Do that, because that helps us to understand how well you've received the information, and also ensures the next time we come up with much better solution, and the speaker also gets to know where we all have to work around. So thank you, Vijay, and thanks a lot, Sukirti. It was amazing partnering with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking time off.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks everybody for joining in. Bye-bye.
Bye.